I didn't think you were such a heartless person. If you don't like that I value family, then just disappear from our home right now. In response to my husband's words that made it seem like he didn't consider me as part of the family, I was speechless. I'm part of the family too, you know? And if anyone should leave, it's you. After all, doesn't this condo belong to my father? I must have hit a nerve by pointing out the truth as my husband shoved me. Don't talk back with excuses. You should just stay silent and obey me. If you don't want to get hurt, you better do as I say. My name is Vienna, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married to my husband for 10 years. I met my husband at work and got married after 3 years of dating. I quit my job when I became pregnant, and for a while I focused on raising our child. When our daughter, Remy, entered kindergarten, I gradually gained some free time, so I found a job at a different company from where I used to work. Together with my husband, we were supporting our household with both our incomes. Our family relationships were quite normal, and we often went out as a family of 3 on weekends, living relatively happy days like everyone else. However, one day, suddenly, that everyday life was shattered. Jock, please help! My sister-in-law, Tiana, showed up at our condo with her young child all of a sudden. When I asked her about the situation while she was in tears, she revealed that she was facing domestic violence and emotional abuse from her husband. Not only were there hurtful words, but he would also resort to violence whenever he was unhappy about something. Lately, the frequency of the violence had increased, and he had even started to threaten their daughter. Out of fear, she fled and came to us for refuge. Please, let me hide here for a while, she pleaded. Without consulting my opinion, my husband immediately agreed to her request without hesitation. Listening further, I learned that her parents' home was in a remote countryside accessible by plane. They couldn't be relied on right away, and Tiana's daughter, Dior, had just started kindergarten this year, so it wasn't guaranteed that she would find a new school immediately. So, for the time being, she wanted to stay nearby. Given the circumstances, it was understandable, and above all, my scared sister-in-law was truly pitiable. Our apartment wasn't spacious, but it could accommodate a woman and a child. I thought I could take care of them for a while, but I wished my husband had considered my opinion too. I definitely had that feeling. So, we accepted my sister-in-law under these circumstances, but even after a month had passed since she moved in, there was no sign of her taking any action. Initially, she had said, I'll find a new place to live and proceed with divorce as soon as possible, so I won't cause too much trouble for you and your husband. Yet, I hadn't seen her doing anything proactive. She seemed to go out, but she often returned in the early morning or smelling of alcohol, and it didn't seem like she was out searching for a new home or progressing with divorce proceedings. Thinking it might be difficult for her to talk to me, I asked my husband, but he said, You're not family, so you don't have the right to pry so deeply. He flatly rejected me. I'm not asking out of curiosity, I just want to know how long my sister-in-law will be staying. Even for shopping, the quantities change with my sister-in-law and my niece being here. The consumption of daily necessities also differs. Since I'm the one managing the household finances, I should have the right to know such things. Realizing it would be pointless to talk to my husband, I decided to directly ask my sister-in-law. How's the progress with the divorce? Any plans for moving out? When I asked her that, my sister-in-law lowered her head and said, I'm sorry, but it's still too painful to think about. Despite seeming down, she eats around 2 servings of food without a problem, and when I come home from work, she's often dozing off on the sofa, snoring. Next to her, empty beer cans are strewn about. I can't imagine that she's in a state of heartbreak. It's not good for the children's education either. I've mentioned it to my husband several times too, but he always says, It's probably just a reaction to all the pent-up frustration. It's a good thing to have this much freedom. Cut them a little slack. He doesn't seem to show any signs of anger at all. From this response, I realized that my husband has a strong attachment to his sister. We rarely saw each other except for occasional family gatherings, so I thought he was just happy to see her after a long time, but this was something I hadn't noticed before. Taking advantage of my husband's lack of anger, my sister-in-law freely does as she pleases. Lately, even before I leave for work, she sprawled on the sofa lazily. As time went on, she became less and less considerate, ordering delivery food and making a mess, leaving it on the table untouched. After I pointed that out, she started helping herself to things from the fridge, and I, exhausted from work, had to go shopping. My patience with my sister-in-law, who wouldn't lift a finger to help around the house, was reaching its limit. I've really reached my limit, Around 3 months after my sister-in-law moved in, my anger had reached its peak. Seriously, can't you start properly talking to her about it as her brother? I've been tolerating this for a while, but I can't bear it anymore. As I said this, my husband's face twisted in displeasure. Don't say such awful things. Tiana is an important family member to me. Are you saying I can't value my own family? Facing my indignant husband, I retorted firmly. True, I felt sorry for her and sympathized, but it's been 3 months already and I've had enough. She's done nothing, not even household chores. After accommodating Tiana, who just lounges around for 3 months, I think I've shown enough care, haven't I? Tiana, who has been oppressed until now, is finally getting a breather. Isn't it good that she can just laze around for a change? Our home being a place where Tiana can feel safe is proof, don't you think? It's quite a pleasant thing. I simply couldn't comprehend my husband, who appeared genuinely pleased. If she's settled down that much, why doesn't she at least help with the household chores? There's no progress in divorce or finding a new place, and it just seems like she's conveniently freeloading. Perhaps my words struck a chord as my husband retorted with anger. Saying things like you felt sorry for her and accommodated her, I can see you looking down on Tiana. To say such cruel things about Tiana who's hurt? Do you not understand human emotions? I never thought you could be so cold-hearted, so devoid of humanity. Faced with such words from my husband, my own frustration exploded. If you want to talk about valuing family, then I'd like you to value your family too. We both work, but all the household chores are left to me. You don't lift a finger to help with anything. You seem to handle your niece's drop-offs and pickups, but have you ever done the same for Remy? The kindergarten is close by, why don't you try going together? I work too and get tired, so I can't take care of Tiana and Dior as well. If you don't like that, then at least cooperate a bit. And if you really feel sorry for Tiana, why don't you look for a new place for her and contribute some money every month? Of course, from your pocket money. I firmly confronted my husband, unwavering, and perhaps feeling guilty, he fell silent. Even though we both work hard, our finances aren't exactly overflowing. Naturally, it's impossible for my sister-in-law's rent to be paid from my husband's allowance, so it seemed my husband had no choice but to accept my suggestion silently. As my husband started taking my daughter to kindergarten and back, I was relieved, thinking he had finally changed his attitude. I hoped he would start helping with other household chores too, but my husband refused even to help with taking out the trash, claiming he was tired from the drop-offs and pickups. However, considering that he had started doing drop-offs and pickups, it was significant progress and I reminded myself not to expect too much. However, a few weeks after my husband had started doing drop-offs and pickups, my daughter complained that she didn't want him to do it anymore. When I asked her why she felt that way, my daughter tearfully shared something unbelievable. She said that every time my husband does the drop-offs and pickups, he talks only to our niece. If my daughter tries to join the conversation, he becomes immediately annoyed or ignores her. Once, when my daughter was reading a book after giving up, my husband randomly spoke to her, but when she didn't notice she was being addressed, he apparently yelled at her angrily. Even though Dior is so obedient and cute, you're really not cute at all. Honestly, I wonder who you got that from. Shocked by his words, my daughter came to me for advice, unable to bear it any longer. Having observed how busy I had become since my sister-in-law arrived, my daughter must have thought my workload was increasing and she had endured it all this time. I deeply regretted not realizing this sooner, wondering why I hadn't noticed earlier. I immediately protested to my husband, and I started doing the drop-offs and pickups myself, but my anger didn't subside, especially since my husband showed no sign of remorse. Ever since my sister-in-law moved in, my daughter and my life has become a mess. We can't endure this anymore. But if my sister-in-law continues to stay, we need to seriously think of a solution. Just as I was thinking that, a decisive incident occurred. It happened on a holiday afternoon while I was preparing lunch for everyone as usual. Suddenly, I heard my husband's yelling from the living room. Panicked, I rushed over to see what had happened and found my husband shouting at our daughter, grabbing her collar. Ignoring our daughter's apologies of, "I'm sorry," my husband continued yelling without listening to her. Since when did you become such a rotten kid? I never intended to raise you like this. Looks like we need to straighten out that rotten nature of yours. His words were too harsh for a kindergartner, and I quickly stepped between them. Remy looked scared. Even if you're scolding her for doing something wrong, there's a way to scold, isn't there? First, explain what happened. Remy made Dior fall over. Startled by my husband's words, I widened my eyes and asked, Really, Remy? When I questioned her, Remy shook her head vigorously and said, It wasn't on purpose. Don't lie! Stop making excuses! As my husband got even angrier, I calmed him down and decided to hear the whole story from our daughter. Remy is a very kind child who cares about me being busy. I couldn't believe she would hurt someone without a reason. That's why I couldn't imagine Remy lying. I held Remy in my arms, gently stroking her to stop her trembling, and she slowly began to speak. Dior tried to take my stuffed animal. I was playing with it, so I told her to wait. But Dior pulled the stuffed animal away, and I thought it might break, so I let go, and Dior fell down. The stories clearly didn't match. I gave my husband a stern look. The stories don't match. Besides, it seems like Remy was just trying to get her stuffed animal back. I think Dior is at fault here. Even if that's true, ultimately the one who made Dior fall is in the wrong. She might have gotten hurt. While my husband's point was valid, I had been bothered by how he always favored our niece. True, there's a point to that as well, but you shouldn't just scold Remy, right? Remy could have been hurt too, you know? You've always favored Dior, it seems like you're fond of her, but Remy is also your beloved daughter, right? That's true, but Dior is also my dear sister's child. Isn't it obvious who's more important? And you're just taking Remy's side all the time. Between Remy and Dior, who's more important? His question was so absurd I could only sigh in response. Remy is definitely more important. As I naturally replied, I didn't think you were so heartless. My husband said in a tone of disbelief. If he thought I was heartless, then he was too. He was neglecting his own daughter while showing favoritism to his niece. When I told him exactly that, my husband became furious. If you don't like that I care about my family, then get out of our home right now! Hearing those words from my husband, who seemed not to consider me as part of his family, I was stunned. But I composed myself and revealed the truth. I'm also part of this family, aren't I? And if you want someone to leave, it should be you. Since you seem to have forgotten, isn't this condo owned by my father? It seemed my husband had truly forgotten, and my words brought him back to reality. So what? What are you trying to say? This condo is ours now. No, it belongs to my father, so if anyone should leave, it's you guys. My words didn't sit well with him, and my husband pushed me. I was hit in a sensitive spot and felt pain, struggling to get up. Seeing me in pain and in tears, my husband continued to rage. Don't talk back. You should just obey me quietly. If you don't want to get hit, do as I say. Seeing my husband's behavior and me collapsing, my daughter burst into tears. Seeing my daughter desperately trying to wake me up, pulling at me and pleading, Mom, don't die, something inside me snapped. Fine, I understand. If you're going to say that much, then I'll leave. After that, I packed my things and returned to my parents' house with my daughter. When my parents heard the story, they were furious and they immediately started talking about divorce. Since our relationship with my in-laws was good, I thought it would be best to communicate, so I contacted my mother-in-law. When I told my mother-in-law about everything, she got angry on my behalf. However, she seemed to have no idea about the domestic violence my sister-in-law had mentioned. There had never been any consultations before, and my sister-in-law's husband also didn't seem like the type to do such things. So, my mother-in-law said that she would contact her husband's workplace to confirm and asked me to wait for her to contact me again. Since I had been skeptical about my sister-in-law's claims all along, I immediately agreed without hesitation. Then, after waiting for a few days, my mother-in-law proposed meeting in person to talk. My sister-in-law's husband would also come, and my worried parents accompanied me. We decided to have the conversation at a nearby cafe. Well, the truth is, I was being cheated on. The husband started the conversation like that, and I couldn't hide my surprise. My wife's affair came to light, and we were in the middle of divorce mediation. However, my wife, who was determined not to pay any compensation, suddenly disappeared. I was quite busy with work at the time, so I couldn't contact my in-laws immediately. He didn't have my in-laws' contact information, and he was at a loss. My mother-in-law reached him just when he needed it, and he seemed to be thankful about it. My mother-in-law bowed deeply to both me and my sister-in-law's husband, and said, I apologize on behalf of my children for being so foolish. I'm truly sorry, she said. It's hard to believe that such a good person could have given birth to those two. But above all, they had blatantly lied and stayed in our home. I couldn't believe my sister-in-law. I had tolerated her actions like not doing housework and coming home late, thinking that she might be heartbroken. But it turns out it was all a lie. Because of my sister-in-law, my family was broken. I can't forgive her under any circumstances. It seemed like everyone in the room felt the same, so we headed to my condo where my husband and sister-in-law are living. Why are you here? My sister-in-law froze as soon as she saw her husband. Even my husband, who showed himself after her, said, We told you not to show your face again. You hurt Tiana and came here with that audacity? Leave! They tried to kick me and her husband out, but my mother-in-law, who appeared from behind, retorted, It's you who should leave. Tiana, you not only cheated and hurt us, but you also disappeared without paying compensation, right? Hearing this, my husband asked hastily, Tiana, what's going on? Tiana cheated on me, and we're in the middle of a divorce mediation. She didn't want to pay compensation, so she disappeared. Upon hearing this, my husband confronted my sister-in-law. Have you been deceiving us? Seeing my husband's reaction, my mother-in-law continued, You're in no position to talk. You never verified the truth, unilaterally burdened Vienna, neglecting both your wife and real daughter. I don't remember raising a child like that. As my tearful mother-in-law said this, neither my husband nor my sister-in-law could respond. We've had enough of you. We're getting a divorce. And we'll sell this condo, so pack your bags and leave. With those words, we helped my mother-in-law, who was weak in her knees from shock, and left the condo. My husband was saying something like, Please forgive me, behind us, but he's a stranger now. I don't need to listen to a stranger's words. After that, as we proceeded with the divorce procedures, my husband repeatedly contacted me, saying he didn't want a divorce. When I refused his calls, he came to my parents' house, yelling at the front door, If you want me to sign the divorce papers, open the door and show your face. Unable to bear it, I called the police. Since I had taken a medical certificate after he pushed me last time, I had filed a police report, and this time he was caught in the act and taken into custody. Subsequently, he was arrested and fined. In the end, we managed to finalize the divorce through lawyers. Now, he's apparently struggling to repay the alimony every month. We had just managed to make ends meet with our dual income, so it's tough for him to pay child support from his salary alone. My husband and I used to be colleagues and had many mutual friends, so the rumors spread quickly, it seems. His behavior became known at work and he was promptly demoted. If it weren't for my sister-in-law's issue, we might still be living together. It sends shivers down my spine. Of course, my sister-in-law's actions left deep wounds in my daughter's heart. I can't forgive her, but in terms of recognizing my husband's underlying abnormality early on, perhaps it wasn't all bad. As for the root cause of everything, my mother-in-law felt responsible and took my sister-in-law back to their home and has been monitoring her constantly. Now she's working diligently at a local factory to the point where there's no need for surveillance. Seems like she has little personal time, and most of the money she earns from working is being handled by her mother to repay her debts. Seemingly, very little is left in her hands, and she has hardly any money for leisure activities. While the issue was resolved this way, the emotional scars remained for my daughter and me. Even staying in that place, we were reminded of unpleasant things. When my daughter started elementary school, we decided to move back to my parents' home. Although my parents' home isn't as big as my in-laws, it's a comfortable countryside place. My daughter enjoys her freedom and space, and she seems to have made more friends recently. She laughs more joyfully than before. With my parents and grandparents around to help with childcare, I can work without worrying about leaving my daughter alone. I'm glad we moved here. It was the right choice. My daughter's happiness is the most important thing to me, so I will continue to put in all my effort to ensure she has a comfortable life in the future.